Hey, you're finally awake.
Delighted to be talking with the voice of Jim Gordon, someone who's been featured in animation like Doc McStuffins, as well as, oh my goodness, too many video games to name. Elder Scrolls is one of those that's out there, as well as I believe some Call of Duty work, some Assassin's Creed work, all sorts of universes that I've spent hours playing in. But this person has spent many hours, I'm sure, creating in them, and that is actor, voice artist, and someone who has some musical connections as well. Michael Gough. Michael, may I call you Michael? Is that okay?
Uh, hmm, Michael. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. If you prefer a different title, I'm glad to do that.
Lord Gough, perhaps?
Why certainly, absolutely.
Lord.
As Bill Skarsgård says in Nosferatu, my blood demands it. So absolutely.
I don't know if my blood. I'll tell you. When if you have your family crest, you can look it up and your heraldry or whatever. So when I was a kid, I guess my dad had our little family crest sitting, got the plaque and everything. And it's Irish in nature in origin, and there's a slogan like the family slogan
Hmm.
beneath
Hmm.
in Gaelic, and basically it translates into "Get out of my way." So
There you go.
that's like the royal command from the bloodline. So yes, no, Michael will be certainly
Well, thank you.
the.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we press on. We press on. I love that family crest. That's a great slogan. That's a great just way of reminding yourself we move forward.
Oh yeah, that's right. Nothing stand in the way.
That's right. Well, of course, I'm curious. It's one of the questions that I like to ask folks about their origins. How did you get connected with storytelling? We were talking a little bit about English literature a little while ago as well, so I'm curious how all of that weaves in.
It's interesting how you are referring to things as storytelling, which basically that's what it is. That's and I when I saw your preview of questions or topics or whatever, I thought about that and I thought, you know, is everything is storytelling. Every time we open our
Hmm.
mouth, it's storytelling. Every time we
Hmm.
um, and even not even nonverbal storytelling. Um, uh, how did this start? I got into the quote, the acting part of storytelling kind of late, even though I think I had tendencies in that direction from even just when I was a kid. I didn't really start acting, quote unquote, until I was almost done with college. But I did. I remember. Well, I remember a couple of things, kind of vaguely, or maybe even more specifically. As a kid, sitting in front of the TV and sometimes trying to mimic what I was hearing or seeing on TV, and just kind of,
Hmm.
hey, I can, I can, I want to try to sound like that, or what's that about? Um, and then I think I always kind of enjoyed reading out loud. Um,
Hmm.
that might have been something I did, in class as a kid, and maybe even if the teacher asked, "Does somebody want to read this paragraph?" They go, "Oh, I'll do it." So yeah, I do remember, which was sort of a turning point in college. I took a class just as kind of an extra because I needed some credits, and it sounded interesting. It was called Reader's Theater, which is
Hmm. Hmm.
pretty self-explanatory. It was taught by a woman who was one of the drama professors. This is at UC Santa Barbara, uh, where I
Hmm.
originally went on a teeny tiny athletic scholarship. Uh, that's a whole different story. But I threw things. I was a shot putter and discus thrower,
Oh,
uh,
nice, nice.
actually. And I loved the whole, just the primal aspect of taking a, like this object and, you know, heaving it and throwing it as far as you can. But there's all kinds of technical work involved. And, you know, it's a lot more, it can be a lot more complicated than you would think. And if you want to be good, you have to put in all kinds of time and work and working out. And and I was pretty good, but I wasn't like going to go to the Olympics or anything. So when I was done, you know, when I was almost done with college, I was like, I was getting my English degree, but I wasn't sure, well, what am I going to do with that? And I thought maybe I'll stick around and try to get like a music degree. And I kind
Hmm.
of realized that's like a, that might be too much work for me. I know I might be too lazy for that. But I had taken this extra class called Reader's Theater, and it was really, you know, and it felt kind of natural to me because reading things out loud just wasn't anything that made me uncomfortable or anything. I was like, you know, something that I was excited to do. And the
Hmm.
woman who taught the class, she was very helpful and encouraging. And she said, you know, you should, have you ever, you know, acted before? And I said, well, not really. So it was kind of on her urging that I, you know, but the other thing that happened was they had a playwriting class. And so at the end of this last semester of this year, they had, I guess they had a contest, you know, and the group of winners or whatever got their one act plays produced at the
Hmm.
college. So I noticed some signs around the campus that they were casting for original one act plays. And I think this was after I had taken the Reader's Theater class. And I just thought, maybe that's something I'll just try before I leave, before I'm done with college. So it was like a cattle call, basically, where
Hmm.
there were like four or five authors who were trying to cast their play. And so this one girl came up to me and she said, would you read part of my play here? So I did, and I read some of it. And she said, okay, don't talk to anybody else. I want you in my play. And I thought, oh,
Nice.
is that how this works? Okay. Um, and so I did. That was the first time I acted. And I'm still really good friends with her. Uh,
Nice.
she went on to, she won an Emmy for she won a daytime Emmy for like, it was what they used to call an after school special. It was like,
Hmm.
it was like these dramas that had like, usually they had some kind of message to them or whatever. And then she's done a lot of writing stuff and conducts writing workshops. So anyway, she's yeah, and we're still very good friends. But so I sort of owe my whole career to her. But then
Very cool.
yeah, and it was, and then a little switch went up. I mean, I think there were only, I can't remember if there was only one or two performances of this. Might have only been one, but something clicked and a little light bulb went off, and I thought, because it seemed to go well, you know, and people laughed where they were supposed to, and it was a very cool, one act play, and I thought, oh, okay, well maybe I'll stick around in school and try the theater and acting thing.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I did, even though UC Santa Barbara technically didn't have a graduate program for acting. They had an undergraduate acting program, which is what I did. But at the same time, I was a graduate student in playwriting. So I got my master's degree with an emphasis in playwriting, but I went through the whole undergraduate, this was 2 years of acting. And then I started doing plays in college. And again, as I may have warned you ahead of time, I'm sort of long-winded sometimes. So my
It,
end,
it works well.
uh, and then it just, one thing sort of led to another, and I ended up down in Los Angeles. Basically, well, again, I'll try to be brief and sum this up.
You're fine. You are fine.
Well, this summer, right after I was done with, I finished the 2 years and had the master's degree, and was thinking, well, what am I going to do? About this acting thing. There was a film that was being shot in Santa Barbara, and I got wind of, or there were casting notices, so I went and auditioned for this film. Hadn't never done any camera acting yet, but turned out I got cast as the lead character in this film. It was like an independent film that shot over the summer for like 2.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was great. I mean, it was really fun. It was funny. And I learned all about, okay, being on camera and acting there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I first went to LA, well, actually, even before I moved to LA, the drama department at UC Santa Barbara had been contacted by a casting person or an agent, I guess, that they were putting out a net looking for, youngish actors for this movie called Dune.
Mm-hmm.
It was directed by David Lynch.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, I was very familiar with David Lynch because I had kind of become obsessed with David Lynch. And actually, my master's thesis was comparing the film Eraserhead to some certain plays of Beckett and Strindberg.
Oh, nice, nice. Very
And
cool.
weird as that sounds, there are actually a lot of kind of connections you can make. So the drama department at Santa Barbara, gave them my name, thankfully. So I went down to LA and I auditioned for Dune. I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
to meet David Lynch. This was for the casting director, so I was kind of bummed about that. But yeah, nothing happened. Kyle MacLachlan was the one who was cast, and that was his first film,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think. But that's sort of the long story of how this all sort of started. And then I moved to LA, and it wasn't even the voice acting thing wasn't even on the radar for a few
Oh.
years. But I did I think it was the agent who called regarding Dune. I did end up signing with them for just regular acting, and then I was doing a lot of theater in
Mm-hmm.
LA, which is something you can kind of do on your own. You can find it, and go and audition for things without an agent, at least then. And it was, most of it was, and I wasn't in a union yet.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, the theater was called equity waiver, which means if you are in the union, you can do it, but it basically means that it has to be in a theater that's 99 seats or less.
Interesting.
A lot of really good stuff was being done that way. And after being in LA for a couple of years and, going on some auditions and not really getting anything and working some, just other jobs, um, I did actually eventually get cast in a play that turned out to be a union job, and they were nice enough to kind of usher me into the stage union, Actors Equity.
Nice.
This, this was a production of The Tempest.
Ah.
Uh, and ironically, it was back up. I'm originally from the Bay Area, like south of San Francisco, born in San Jose, and grew up in what became Silicon Valley. Um, Went to high school with Steve Jobs.
Oh.
He was a senior when I was a freshman. I still have
Yeah.
the yearbook. I could go off on another tangent there, but I'll maybe later. Um, but so this production of The Tempest was actually up in San Jose. Uh, and it was a huge production with live symphony orchestra playing this whole soundtrack live. And so that's how I got into the equity, the theater union, which back then you could wait a year and then join SAG. Um,
hmm
what I did, you can't do that anymore. Uh, so again, this is just kind of a large overview of how this got started for me.
I love how one door sort of leads to another, and
Yeah,
I'm just imagining the process of voice acting, and I imagine there's a lot of embodiment that goes into that particular style, any kind of acting really, but curious how you embody particular characters and think about that.
yeah, it is. And I did eventually sort of. That's where I actually really started to make a living, was as a voice actor. After I took a class, because it was just something I didn't. I guess I thought, well, I know it exists. I don't really know what it is. Took a class, and the woman who taught the class again was very helpful for me. She kind of steered me towards getting this voice agent, because it's separate. That's a whole separate thing. Who
Mhm.
I'm, and I'm still with her, this agent, after many years. Um, and it is interesting because you're tapping into your imagination.
Mhm.
Um, of course, you are given, guidelines in the form of a script and direction and all that. Um, but you can't physically act it out. I mean, you often do while you're recording your voice. I mean, you have to move and do things. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to come up with a good answer to the question, how do you embody a character if you're just using your voice? I mean,
Mhm.
it's basic at its core, it's the same as anything. There has to be even even an extreme character, something that's kind of wildly out there, or some kind of animated thing, or if it's something not human, obviously, there has to be a certain truth and reality at the bottom of it all,
Mhm.
even if it's
Mhm.
silly and goofy, or just like frightening and sick or whatever. But and then there's all the technical stuff about how you use your voice. It's a weird dichotomy, because especially now, auditioning is all done by yourself, basically,
Yeah.
at home. Whereas you used to go, people used to help you and give you input and feedback and direction. Now, I mean, you can do auditions. I mean, there are people who you can hire to help you record your auditions over Zoom or something. But for me, it doesn't really work, because I never know exactly when something's coming in. A lot of times
Mhm.
I'm up until the wee hours of the morning trying to finish stuff that came in late in the day, that's due the next day or whatever. Um,
Mhm.
so now you have to be the director and the editor and the, do all the technical audio stuff. So it's really hard for me anyway to not listen to myself too much when I'm auditioning. It
Hmm.
used to be a
Hmm.
lot more organic when I wasn't so concerned about, is this sounding good? Is this because is this level okay? Uh, and then I listen back and I go, oh, that sucked. And then I'll do it over way too many times, too many takes, and then it takes forever to try to edit it. So it's just it's a weird, you know, split personality thing for me. And again, I know there are other people who are probably, yeah, just do it, and then I just, for me, it just, I'm, I have a hard time separating. What I used to be able to do was just concentrate on the act itself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then somebody else would give me, help and direction and feedback. So now it's a things are kind of piled on top of each other. Like, okay, I'm listening on one level and another level and a third, a technical level. But that's the way it is
Lots of creative balance and juggling, it sounds like.
now. Yeah, yeah. Um, but I mean, it's really when and especially when you get to do, it, or you have a job and you get to go and do it. It's just it's great. I'm
Hmm.
always thankful. I'm always grateful for work, for getting to do it, because it's like, gee, I think this is what I used to do when I was a kid, sitting in
Yeah.
front of the TV. Um, and then you don't have to worry so much. Somebody else is listening and they'll tell you, well, they'll guide you along. So if you're just doing the job, whatever it is, then that's the reward, definitely.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm wondering about being part of kind of the video game world and fandom. What has that been like to engage with people?
I'm stunned sometimes. It's amazing. I mean, in the world of video games, there are a couple of things I've done which I guess have become iconic in some ways.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, one is the for Diablo, uh, the character Deckard Cain, who's like kind of the old, keeper of the knowledge and the the red flag waver of of the evil that is to come. Um, and for some reason, yeah, I get a lot of, fan mail and things, and people saying, "Oh my God, this was my childhood." And another one has been the Gears of War
Yeah.
franchise. I just actually, and these, it's not one character, but it's the characters of the Carmine brothers, who the first brother, Anthony, gets killed off. Well, the first brother to appear gets killed off in Gears of War 1. For some reason, he made enough of an impression that they wanted to kind of bring him back for Gears of War 2, even though he was dead. So he had a brother,
Hmm.
Benjamin. There's a you know Anthony Benjamin. Benjamin gets killed in Gears of War 2. And by that point, the Carmine brothers had become kind of a thing. And there was a third brother, Clayton. So ABC, Anthony Benjamin Clayton. Clayton was the bigger brother, the badassest brother of the three. Um, and they had a whole like campaign to vote as to whether Carmine should survive or should Carmine die, because it's kind of become a thing that the Carmine brother dies. Um,
Hmm.
and they turned it into a whole like charity fundraising thing and T-shirts, save Carmine or Carmine must die. Uh,
Hmm.
Fortunately, I guess for me, Clayton Carmine survived and he still exists. But
Yeah.
I've seen people with like tattoos up and down their leg of Carmine. Somebody just sent me like a large box full of Carmine stuff. I had there was like a helmet that was amazing. There was like at least a half a dozen different action figures, original paintings, prints. I mean, there were like at least a dozen things in this box. Uh, it kind of blows me away. Um, so yeah, and Elder Scrolls is another thing that kind of has had some fanatical uh, following, I guess. I guess the
Hmm.
opening line of the game has become a meme, uh, where it's the line of, what is it? Hey, you're finally awake.
Hmm.
The
Very nice.
They're being wheeled into town, in a cart, prisoners. And I will say that for Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, um, there were so many characters.
Hmm.
Um, and they did tell me, I think at the end, they said, you've got more lines in this than anybody. And it was basically all the Nord race. Yeah, it's crazy. It's amazing how you never really know. And even some really obscure things that I've done, some people are just like all over.
Hmm.
Of course, some of the Disney stuff, the Disney
Hmm.
cartoons, the Winnie the Pooh, that was kind of my first big break in the voice acting world. Um,
Love it.
you know, Getting to work on a bunch of other Disney things over time has been amazing. And again, it's all like, wow, can't believe it, really.
Now, is there a particular role that you've taken that has been a challenge and has really stretched you? And similarly, is there a role that you would like to take on at some point? I was going for like Silmarillion there, I think, or something like that.
Mm, yeah. Well, I'll just off the top of my head, one thing that challenged me, and basically it was just physically challenging, vocally challenging, but it was for the Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor or Shadow
Hmm.
of War. There were two of them. And it was basically playing some very enjoyable and twisted orcs. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's great when you get to chew the scenery and just, you know, I remember there was one of them who he was um, he was infested with maggots,
Yeah.
and it just gave him like this intense pain slash pleasure. You know,
Yeah.
he was so. Uh, so that's always fun to work with. But the one thing that it did do was just chew my voice to shreds. Um,
Right.
and I've definitely done damage to my voice over time. Um, Gears of War at times was also something that was very, vocally uh, shreddy,
Mm-hmm.
and things too. Um, but it's particularly the Middle Earth, Shadow of whatever. It was great. It was fun, but it would take me at least a couple of days to recover
Mm.
after doing one. And then, I mean, my singing range has definitely shrunk. My high end,
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, where to go? Um, so, and that stuff happens with time anyway. But uh, you know, some of the rough vocalizing hasn't, necessarily helped. Um, but that's, yeah, and that's just physical stuff. Trying to think of what, you know, something that was challenging. Well, in a way, I don't know if this was challenging in a different way, but it involved doing motion capture. You know,
Mm-hmm.
where you're wearing the tight suit, and in my case, you're wearing a headset with a little camera in front of your face on
Mm-hmm.
a thing, and so this was specifically mostly for Shrek. Um,
Yeah.
so I was maybe, I don't know, not much lately, so I'm not sure what's happening, but the backup voice of Shrek, um, which is basically like your Shrek's understudy.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever, in this case, the original voice, Mike Myers, whatever he wasn't available for, or if there were things he just didn't want to do, or if he was asking too much money or something. And these involved, could be lots of different things, which was fun and great, like commercials or video games or like live installation type events where they had pre-recorded tracks, or uh, all kinds of different things where they use the voice of a character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for this particular thing, it was, you know, just doing the voice of Shrek was, yeah, it was kind of challenging because you're matching, and that's, come to think of it, that is always something that's a challenge. And it's been some of the biggest things I've done have been voice matches, over
Mm-hmm.
the character from Winnie the Pooh was originally done by another actor. Howard Morris was his name. I knew who he was. Very funny, like, character actor, in the Winnie the Pooh short films back in the '60s.
Mm-hmm.
So this was when they were doing the Winnie the Pooh cartoon series in the late '80s, and
Mm-hmm.
some of the original voices returned for the cartoon series, but some of them weren't around anymore. Howard Morris was still around, but he just didn't want to do the cartoon. So they were casting, sound-alikes. So that was my first kind of big experience. But I remembered that character from when I was a kid, and I remember going to this place to do the audition, and this place used to be like the kind of the premier voiceover casting place around here, and there used to be,
Mm-hmm.
like a dozen of them all around at least. Um, but that character has the way he speaks with the whistle, and
Mm-hmm.
that, keeping that up is a challenge. I for years I hadn't done anything involving the gopher, but then just a couple of months ago they had something. I think it was like uh am I allowed to even talk about it? Something to do with princesses. I'll just
Yes.
leave that.
Uh-huh.
Um, and actually, this wasn't the character of the gopher, but it was the character of the beaver from Lady and the Tramp.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Preceded the gopher from Winnie the Pooh, and it was a different actor too, but it was basically kind of the same voice. The beaver sounded a little older, but he also had that, what's going on here? I can't see what I'm doing. He
Uh-huh.
had that.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Nice.
Um, so and there have been some other, like sound alike characters that I've gotten to do, and that is a challenge. And Shrek for sure. Um, and going back to the woman who wrote the first play that I ever acted in, she was kind of instrumental in helping me get this Shrek gig. Um, yeah, I won't go too far into it, but uh, when I was living in LA, and she after Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara, she went to film school and
Uh-huh.
then moved to LA. And for a while, she and I and two other people, we just that she knew that were friends of hers. We would get together like once every other week or so at this one restaurant, and we would just try to come up with we were going to write stuff.
Nice.
Didn't or bounce ideas off of each other and write stuff. And so years later, flash forward, it turns out that one of the other two people in this little foursome, this guy, he had become he was working for DreamWorks and their new animation department, and he had kind of risen up the ladder pretty quickly. These were people that she knew from film school, so he had become a producer at DreamWorks. So long
Mm-hmm.
story short, she heard or talked to him or something, and he had mentioned the fact we need to find like an alternate voice for Shrek, because he was working on Shrek. This was after the first Shrek movie, before Shrek 2.
Mm-hmm.
And just so one thing kind of led to another, and I ended up auditioning for him. And no, of course, we knew each other from before, but just over the phone. And then next thing I knew, I was asked to fly up to San Francisco, where their headquarters used to be. Now it's in down here in LA, and doing like a handful of different commercials as Shrek.
Nice.
Um, so that, and again, there were things here and there over time. Whenever there was a Shrek movie, there were other things to do that were involved. But lately, nothing except, again, there was something about maybe 6 months ago that I think was a video game. But kind of getting back to where I was going before, the motion capture thing. This was
Mm-hmm.
Shrek, and it was a whole series of these short videos where Shrek and Donkey have their own talk show. It was called
Right.
Swamp Talk, and it was basically for DreamWorks' new YouTube channel, I think. Um, but so that was an interesting challenge where you're actually acting the character out physically as well as vocally, and there wasn't a whole lot of movement. Basically, it was just them on their little set of their talk show. But there was definitely some movement sometimes, and you had to kind of, you know,
Mm-hmm.
embody, the green ogre, and it was a wild setup too. And DreamWorks had their own motion capture studio, sound stage, and it was pretty big. And there were there were cameras all over the place on the walls to capture all these different angles of you, in your tight suit with the reflecting things all over it. But even in real time, you could see like a rough version of what was going on.
Oh,
So
nice,
you would
nice.
move and you'd look at the monitor and you see Shrek moving. It was a rough, it wasn't like a finished. The motion was still a little, herky jerky or whatever. But that was fascinating. So that was definitely an interesting challenge.
Yeah. Well, there is a new Shrek movie coming out, so they may be calling again. One
Do you,
never knows.
I don't even, I'm not even current. I didn't know that. I mean, I kept hearing things for a long time, and sure, I haven't, yeah, I hope so. One
Yeah.
thing that I do know, having been at this long enough, is that things come and they go. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it
Any
was there were
oh,
because
go
there
ahead.
were donkey sound alike actors, and there were a
Hmm.
few different ones that I worked with in different things over time. So never exactly sure, okay, why why are they using one sound alike here, but a different one here?
Hmm.
Did they replace somebody? Is it I never exactly know. what's going on behind the scenes with all this. But yeah, I mean, I'm knocking on wood. And it certainly has been a nice little chunk of what I've gotten to do over the years is some sound like characters.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
also to originate a character too.
Is there the other part of that question was a particular goalpost character or type of role even that you'd like to tackle?
Hmm. 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 Uh, it would be nice to just keep working.
Yeah.
First, because, well, I won't detour too much on this, but the whole AI thing is
Yeah.
a little scary. And there's been a strike going on, the SAG after the union. It started like last July for the specifically the video game industry. And
Mm-hmm.
it's still ongoing, even though some projects have signed like interim agreements. But I know a lot of that, much of what the strike is about has to do with what kind, guidelines for AI and how it's going to
Yeah.
be used and how you can, you know, how do you prevent being, well, first of all, them using stuff you've done, without compensation, or
Mm-hmm.
how, how do you regulate it? It's the Wild West, basically, right now. So I know that if they have a voice print of you saying pretty much anything, they can generate, a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe it doesn't sound exactly right here and there, or it doesn't quite sound real, but it's all pretty much in its infancy. And it's only going to get more sophisticated. So that I'm not sure that scares me. Um, but I'm trying to think of like a particular kind of character to embody. I mean, it's, I guess, like most actors, it's like, hey, whatever they will have me do, I'd love
Mm-hmm.
to. Man, if it's something that's completely um, reprehensible or something, no, I guess not. But my boundaries are pretty wide. I'm like, uh, um, it's always nice to do something that's has a chance to make an impact. I guess I put it
Mm-hmm.
that. And I never even really know because, well, like for example, the Gears of War one, Anthony Carmine. I remember when I recorded the lines originally, didn't even have a name. I think it was just called like Cog Soldier One. So it didn't even seem like it was just sort of an incidental thing. And I mean, he was given a name, and he didn't have a huge number of, he didn't have a lot of lines really,
Mm-hmm.
but he had a few scenes, and there was something about him that resonated somehow, and he did, meet a really unfortunate end where he gets his head blown off.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, something that can somehow resonate and causes people to connect and relate to. I'm being pretty vague about the whole thing, but and again, you never know when that might happen. Um,
Well,
yeah,
circling back to what you were saying about AI, that's part of what I love to talk about on this podcast is the connection to human voice. So just reifying what you're saying there about the valuable role of people being behind the scenes in storytelling and upfront in telling stories as well, and really preserving that human voice and creativity. So uh,
yeah.
sending
Well,
support at least that way.
yeah. Thank you. And I've heard, what it's doing with music also. And again, my knowledge of what's going on is very minimal. But, the fact that you can just, plug in, type in whatever, let's pick a genre of music. Okay.
Mhm.
A tempo. Okay, here's the instruments I want to hear. I want to hear like a distorted guitar. I want to hear I want to hear a metal riff, in this song, or, I want it to be, real bluesy, but hard edged and vocal. You can tell it what you're looking for, and it'll spit out a song. And I've heard, some of these songs, and while they may not be, it's like, okay, I guess that's kind of like by the book. That's a formula I hear, but
Mhm.
it actually it's frightening. Also, it's like, well, it is actually coming up with a kind of a decent piece of music based on what was input, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, and again, I don't really spend a lot of time, in the professional music world. Uh, I dip my toe in it sometimes, but so I don't know how that is impacting, you know, live performance is still live performance. And
Mhm.
even in acting, I guess really the only live performance that AI wouldn't necessarily affect would be theater. Um, Everything else is kind of subject to being recorded in some way,
Mhm.
or and
Mhm.
presented in some medium. Uh, so, I mean, I don't think, it's inevitable. So I just hope that there's still enough of something about the actual human experience and the perhaps unpredictability of what a human voice can do, or the what's the genuineness,
Mhm.
the reality, the passion, the emotion, whatever, the humor, all that stuff, hopefully is still something that is um, special enough to let people keep doing it. Sorry for the
Yeah.
phone around here.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna leave it alone. So yeah, just I'm sort of foaming at the mouth here, but
I completely agree, and yeah, centering that human voice is it's important. I feel like that's part of why people are drawn to stories. Um,
yeah, I mean, this is a dystopian sci-fi story, know,
yeah,
being written as, right in front of us. I can, uh, but well, yeah, I mean, so far there's still, you know, the human bloodline uh, is still coursing.
mhm, mhm, absolutely. Well, the final question, unless you want to add anything in, is where can people find out more information about your work, conventions, things of that nature, online spaces, and then anything that you want to say about the theremin as well would be more than welcome.
um, we're active lately on Instagram. I was sort of occasionally active on Facebook, but I that's been a little dormant. Instagram is a little more, you know, I'll post stuff there, and well, you can see stuff, even though it needs some updating. My website has, clips of a lot of things, and
Mm,
see and hear, and it's michaelgough.com. The Instagram is Michael Gough VO. That's the Instagram handle. Um, as you mentioned, the theremin. So I just got this call, a few weeks ago. So last year, um, through some kind of uh, labyrinthian channels, I was invited to come and play the theremin at it was the big Star Trek convention in Las Vegas.
Nice,
For
nice.
this, they were doing it was like a celebrity cast, basically like people who are known from various Star Trek things, but a lot of pretty big names. So they were doing a live reading of the script of the movie Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Are you familiar with Plan 9 from Outer Space?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
B movie, love it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of regarded like the worst movie ever made, but it's so bad that it's incredible.
Hmm.
Uh, and the movie, the Tim Burton movie was
Yes.
Ed Wood was about the making of Plan 9 from Outer Space, and Ed Wood was the writer director. So it was basically like a script in hand reading, a live reading of the script. So they wanted some live music or live sounds and music accompaniment uh, with the theremin. So that's what I got to do. I was very excited about that. I thought, well, you know, this is like a once in a lifetime thing. And the reason they got my name was uh, some years back, there had been a big fundraising event here in LA for the Bob Moog Foundation, which I had mentioned, I think, before we started. And it's a nonprofit foundation run by Michelle Moog, the daughter of Bob Moog, who was basically the godfather of all synthesizers, electronic instruments, and you know um, started out really with building like theremin kits, and then the Moog synthesizer and all various different shapes and forms. Um, and so the Bob Moog Foundation was having this huge fundraising event at this guy's house. His house, I say house. His backyard is like the size of a park. His name is Michael Boddicker. He's like a big music producer, electronic music guru genius. I think he was either nominated or for an Oscar for something, or has won like a lot of big awards. So they put together a house band for this evening, and they had figured that there were a couple of songs that they wanted to have a theremin on. And so I guess they asked Michelle, is there a theremin player you know of? And there are a lot of them, and there are a bunch of them around here, and there's a bunch of them that are better than I am. But she was kind enough to give them my name, so I I did play. I went to one rehearsal, and I walked in and I'm like looking at these people. I'm like, what am I doing here? And they were like famous musicians. I'm not sure if they're household names, but the guitar player was a guy named Jeff Skunk Baxter. He had been like the guitar player for Steely Dan and a bunch of other things. There were two keyboard players. One was like one of the founders and a keyboard player of Toto and other things. The other guy, he was sort of the leader of this band. He was like the keyboard player and music director for Prince. The
Wow.
bass player had been with the Doobie Brothers, and then a bunch of like classic rock musicians. And I forget the drummer. He was like a session drummer who played with everybody. And they had a male and a female singer, and the guy singer was the son of John Williams, the composer, Star
Uh-huh.
Wars,
Uh-huh.
everything else. So I just was like, God, I'm like out of my league here. But it worked out. The one song was the Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys,
Mhm.
where there's it just has that,
Yes.
which I kind of knew how to do that. The other song they wanted the theremin for was a really kind of complicated Stevie Wonder song that I had never heard before. So I had to kind of try to learn that. Um, anyway, somebody who was at that event that night knew this guy is also, he's like a composer of film and TV. He knew the people that were putting this Star Trek thing together. So I guess they reached out to him. Do you know somebody
Mm.
that plays the theremin? He goes, well, I saw this guy play the theremin at this thing a few years ago. So he's found out my name, and that's how I got contacted for this Star Trek thing. So they just called me, yeah, a month or so ago to say, hey, wonder if you'd be interested in returning, as we're doing another one of these readings. I don't know why they want us back, but they do. And they're doing War of the Worlds this time around, script in hand.
Yes.
Um, so maybe I'll be doing that um,
Wonderful.
again, which would be fun. So that's a whole different thing. Now I did, when they were doing the script, I thought, well, I should be reading a part too, because that's my main thing, right? So
Hmm.
I said, if you have any uncast parts yet, I'm I'm available. They did actually throw me one line, like right before the show. They said, here's a line, you can do that. So that was cool. So we'll see. It looks like it may happen again. So that would be
Wonderful. Wonderful.
in August in Las Vegas. What is it? The Creation Star Trek convention. Again, that's my long answer to your question.
Such a
So,
range. You have such a range. I love it.
well, it's weird. The theremin was just something I just went and saw. There was a documentary about the theremin that came out, I don't know, 25 some odd more years ago, and it
Mhm.
played at a theater here, like this art house theater. And I knew what a theremin was, but I didn't really. And it's called Theremin: An Electronic Odyssey. I'm sure you can find it out there, the documentary. And the director of the documentary was there that night, and doing a question and answer after the showing, after the screening in the audience. So I just said, hey, where can one get one of those? So he gave me the number of the company that made, and this turned out to be Bob Moog's company. Before it was called Moog, it was called Big Briar Music in North Carolina.
Oh,
I
you
think they
are?
they started in like upstate New York originally. Um, so I called this number, and Bob Moog actually answered the phone, which to me, and I mean, I was a musician and into synthesizers and all that. I mean, keyboards, piano keyboards, that's kind of my main thing. My mom was a pianist and a pipe organist and piano teacher. So I was sort of, kind of shoved into it early. So the theremin was just like a lark. And I said, oh, well, I like this. So I ordered one and then ended up getting another one years later, the more fancy version, which they don't make anymore. But yeah, so I just sort of basically taught myself. There are videos that you can watch to help you. It
Mhm.
helps to have a good musical ear. And I did go to the thing in Asheville and went through workshops, and there was this one woman from Russia who was at the time probably considered the best player in the world, and she was there teaching some workshops.
Nice,
Uh,
nice.
so it's yeah, there are a few offshoots which don't really have much to do with the voice acting, but yeah, music was something I was into long before acting, really. So it's kind of fun to get to do anything along those lines.
Yeah, yeah. Follow the passions where they lead.
Well, if you can, yeah, yeah. If
Yeah.
you given a chance to, sure.
Well, I greatly appreciate the time. I appreciate the conversation. Are there any final words, being a person of voice and line, that we should make sure to include on the episode before we go?
Hmm. Listen, always. I'll quote Deckard Cain.
There it
Stay
is.
away. and listen. That's the biggest for me, you know, like listen, the world around you is kind of the biggest classroom, listening to
True.
people talk, because whether it's an accent or just a pattern of speaking, or it's, you know, and that's the way we communicate. You know, if it's a foreign language that you don't understand, I mean, it's always fascinating to me to hear how what speaking, what language is, uh,
Mm-hmm.
just from a purely, what is that? And not even necessarily the content of what they're saying. Of course, that's always important, but just the act of speaking itself is a whole. It's kind of like a carnival going on around us. Uh, a carnival for the ear. Well, it was a blast. Thank you.
Yeah, glad to talk anytime.
Reach out again. It would be great to do it again sometime.
Yeah, we certainly shall. I would love to.